This is my KTM 790 Adventure R. I did a review for Motor Trek over a year ago on the 790S. Fell in love with the bike. Everything I said in that review I still believe in. I also did an early review on this bike after I bought it and put it on the trail. Everything I said in that video is also still true. What I want to cover are the details about this motorcycle that you're not going to hear about when you watch any review. I'm not going to talk about the horsepower or specs of the motorcycle. And if you're looking at a 790R or a 790S, if you're looking at the new 890, don't consider buying one of those until you watch this whole video. So grab some popcorn, it's going to take a little bit. On the back of the motorcycle, on the back of this sprocket, you'll have this little, it looks like a sprocket down on the chain guard. That sprocket is to hang the chain on when you take the wheel on and off. Let's talk about suspension just a tad. I'm 180 pounds and I ride relatively aggressive off-road. The suspension is pretty ideal. I have my preload set at 0. My front suspension is almost factory settings for the compression rebound. I'm just slightly more rebound and 1 click less on the compression. The rear, on the other hand, if it comes out of the factory, is a problem. If you're considering the S model or the R model, pay attention, this may be the deal breaker. If you're going to buy a rear shock anyways, it won't matter. But if you want to have tunability, the problem with this motorcycle and most other big adventure bikes is the back ends come up too fast. When you come over a bump, they rebound because they have so much weight in the back, they rebound too much and then they jump up in the air. And that will cause you to nose down position, which can often result in a crash. This one I have dialed down to 3 on the rebound. So I have it tightened in all the way down and then 3 out from 0 for off-road. It's a very slow rebound, too much for the on-road, but it makes the bike very good off-road. I can jump now without the back falling way up in the air. And then when I get back on the road, I dial it back out to about 15 or so, and that really, really helps. So I've also dialed out the compression on this and turn the compression way down, and that seems to settle the back quite a bit. Having that adjustability has been a good place to do that. No failures on the suspension. I haven't had any issues with that whatsoever. Removing this tire off trail or on the trail is really very, very easy. It's a single nut, and then all the adjustments are in front of the axle. That means if I pull this wheel off to make any kind of a repair or maintenance, when I put it back into position, I don't have to readjust for chain slack. It's already in position. Nice detail. What I think was a really big miss for KTM on this is a bike that's really going to be used for off-road use. The valve stem is off center. These are tubeless rims, which is wonderful. And if I have a hole that I can patch or I can plug, I can throw it back on as a tubeless, and that's great. But if I'm off-road and I get a cut or a slice on the sidewall, or the damage so large on the tire itself that I need to put a tube in the wheel or in the tire, I don't really have an option. I'm going to put a stem through here and it's going to be offset. That really increases the likelihood that I can rip that stem off and end up with a second failure. Kind of a miss in my book. The front wheel, it does have a center stem, so I can put a tube in that tire without any problem. Definitely something to consider if you're going to go off-road or if you're going to travel internationally, where a tube may be something you need for a repair on the road or on the trail. The gear change lever is easily adjustable with an adjustment rod. That gives you almost infinite adjustability to get exactly where you want it. And you can raise it up if you have thick off-road boots, or you can lower it down if you're riding on street boots. The pegs are cleated, and if you remove the rubber, they're an open cleat. They don't pack up almost any mud whatsoever. You have to be in the stickiest clay to get anything to pack up under those pegs. Wonderful detail. Maintenance is easy on this bike. It has 2 drains down here, plus the oil filter. It's easy to access, easy to do on your own, and you can reset the service light without taking it to the dealer and without hooking up a computer or any other software. You can toggle through on your controls, just reset your service. This cover for the front sprocket is an issue. It's solid plastic and it packs up all kinds of gunk behind it. What I did, it was simply drill holes all the way through so it had drainage. I channeled the bottom of it, and then I cut a relief between the pivot where the front sprocket is, or that bolt that comes out, and then the foot peg mount itself. And that was enough relief where even in fairly heavy mud, I haven't had a whole lot of collection there. When I bring it back home or I bring it to someplace to clean the bike, it's very easy to clean that mud back out. Something that needs to be addressed, you can spend a lot of money for an aftermarket fix. There's some beautiful ones out there, or you can just do a cheap fix on your own. But something you're gonna need to do, I don't know if they've fixed that on the 890, but on the 790, pay attention. Underneath the seat, which like so many things is an easy turn the key and it pops out. If you want to add things to the motorcycle, on the back they have a set of wires, one which is set up, it always has power, and the other one is switched power. You have two on the back, and they also have two up under the front in this column here. Those are also 10 amp fused, which is enough for me to run the aftermarket lighting that I have, also for charging things on the bike. Wonderful little details that a lot of manufacturers seem to kind of miss. There's a lot of good reasons to buy the KTM 790, whether it's the S or the R. I mean, the fuel economy, which is in the mid to upper 50s on average and into the 60s on a back road. It could be the horsepower, the weight ratio, the balance of the motorcycle, the quality of the suspension. There's a lot of good reasons to love this motorcycle. But what tipped me over, that made me go, here's my money, let me put it on the table, had to do with the electronics. The electronics on this bike is awesome. The traction control goes 1 through 9. And it has it's so seamless. Off-road, I can't tell when it's interfering until I change the settings or turn it off. The off-road ABS is of high quality. It works very well. It has cornering ABS for on the road. It has a slipper clutch feature. I can turn off my traction control. I can turn off my ABS when I want to, which are two of my biggest complaints. Why would KTM give me a rally mode, which is basically a race mode, and then every single time I hit the start button, have the bike reset back to the previous ABS setting? It's absolutely ridiculous. If I set ABS, turn the bike on, turn it back off, or off and on, it'll hold that off-road ABS, it'll hold my traction control settings or my preferences, but it will not hold ABS off or on, and they're, as I mentioned, the start button. So let me put this in perspective. As I'm rolling down a hill, I stall the motorcycle. When I hit the start button, now I go back to ABS. And not only that, it doesn't always hold it and bring it back to the off-road ABS. When I go from ABS off and it resets, it often takes it all the way back to street mode, which means now I'm rolling downhill in rock or dirt or sand or nastiness or slug snot or whatever else I'm riding on. And now I have basically no ABS, no brakes whatsoever, because they're just free rolling down that hill. And it's happened more than once. I don't like that. And I hope on the 890 KTM addresses that and fixes it. I hope they come out with an update on the computer, a software adjustment to fix that on this bike. On top of that, the manual override for the traction control, which is available on the S model, and on this bike, when you don't have the rally mode on, you have two quick selectors that you can preset so you know what you want to access. You can set that to turn off the traction control, and KTM should have it so you can set the ABS as well. But on the US bikes, apparently we have been removed from that possibility. You cannot set your quick switch to hold and send you straight to turning off your traction control. When I posted this up, those in other countries all say they work. Those people who say they have the same problem as I do, they're all in the US. So I don't know if it's a glitch on my bike or if it's just a US bike thing, but whatever it is, KTM totally screwed the pooch on that one. I bought this bike because I wanted to ride it hard, and now they've taken away a lot of that. And if I sound frustrated, it's because I am. If there's one thing I don't like about this bike, that's it. The other big thing I don't like about the bike is just the heat that comes off. It comes out between the panel and the fuel tank here. It puts off a ton of heat, and that comes off. I've removed the catalytic converter, and I put a mid pipe in it just to see if I could remove the heat. I didn't like the extra noise. It didn't remove that much heat, so I went back to the catalytic. The handlebars are 6-way adjustable. There are 3 screw points up on the steering head underneath, and you can move those mounts forward or back. Also, the clamp that holds the handlebar has a slight forward position, so you can rotate that to pull the bars a little closer to you or a little bit farther from you. So if you're a shorter rider, you can pull those bars into you pretty close. If you're a tall rider, you can push them away. I never did find a perfect position for those handlebars with the stock bend. I'm 6 foot tall. I'm used to riding the GS a lot, which means I sit quite a ways back on the motorcycle. And this motorcycle, being from KTM, is more dirt focused, which means when I sit on the motorcycle, I sit quite close to the steering column, which means I had a lot more bend. I was used to being stretched out. No matter how far I pushed those bars forward, they always felt like they had too much sweep in them. Simple replacement. I went to Pro Taper. I ordered up a set of their EVO bars with a Husqvarna OEM bend, which is very flat comparatively and just slightly lower. Perfect position for on the road, wonderful position for technical riding, a little bit short if I'm standing all day on the bike doing ADV riding. So when I do tours, I may want to put a 20 millimeter, maybe up to 30 millimeter riser underneath this, but probably 20, and that'll be kind of ideal for that. Fit and finish on the bike isn't bad, but if you're accustomed to Honda or BMW, you're probably going to find a few things that you might be a little disappointed on. One, they have a very loose plastic fender that's just plastic. It's a lot like a dirt bike fender. It scuffs easy, it fades. And then also the body work on the back panels are solid plastic. Solid plastic means it's not going to scrape the paint. It just doesn't look as refined. The factory decals, the stickers peel off pretty easy, but there is a plethora of aftermarket opportunities to re-sticker the bike to give it personal character. A lot better quality stickers, but also if you do have falls, scrapes, mishaps, it's pretty inexpensive just to wrap your bike and cover that stuff up. Let's talk about brakes just a little bit. Brakes are kind of an important issue here. KTM has switched over to a KTM branded brake caliper. They're using Galfer brake rotors. The combination should be a good performer, but these brakes seem to require a lot more effort than I would have expected for a high-end motorcycle or high-end braking system. The bigger issue with this bike is the Galfer rotors, which are a high quality rotor generally speaking, have a tendency to get a warp, some warp very bad, some warp just so you feel it at the very end of the stop. Seems to be a common issue on this motorcycle. I had the same issue. By 5,000 miles, it was definitely noticeable. I did end up getting a replacement of the rotors, but also that was joined with a total failure of the rear brake caliper. And I believe that failure was mainly driven by the rotor itself. These carriers, these aluminum carriers that the rotors are carried on, have just that little carrier pin or that little way to capture it, the rivet. Those became so loose on the front of this motorcycle that as I rolled the motorcycle, you would hear the brakes clanking as it rolled. And the front made the clanking, but the rear was even worse than that. It had just a ton of motion and movement. Most of the KTM owners are reporting they're not being covered under warranty. I believe mine was because of the total failure on the back. When I was doing a braking demonstration on a new class, I ended up doing a very small stoppie. When the bike came back down on the ground, because of the long travel suspension, you get a lot of back roll on that motorcycle. And because that caliper was clamping onto a loose rotor, that rotor was able to rotate forward. When the bike landed, it can rotate back, and it's that slamming effect that I believe caused that failure. And the failure was a broken caliper where the pin goes into the caliper, but also it broke the mount that the caliper carries on, that the axle runs through. While we're down here, let's talk about skid plates. KTM's factory skid plate on this bike is made out of the same material I think Coke makes their soda cans out of. But in short, the skid plate on this bike is an underperformer without any question whatsoever. I went with the Black Dog skid plate. I beat the absolute snot out of this. I did cause a failure. There's a metal plate that goes across this upper portion, and those welds snapped off. I put some bolts through that plate, and I haven't had any issue since then. Again, putting this skid plate through some serious challenges, far more than I think most riders will. The exhaust uses a double stainless steel rod that's welded to the exhaust to keep you from melting your pants. That's a really nice feature. Because it's open, it doesn't collect mud behind it that causes corrosion or is hard to clean out or stinks. And there's no failure points. There's no screws to rust or to fall off. The rear shock is well protected. It's got a shield on the shock itself, plus there's a sub fender for the back wheel. Both of those in concert work very well. Even in the muddiest conditions, my shock has always been well shielded and well protected. The rear foot pegs mount to the subframe. 2 bolts, and you can remove that if you don't want to have that back there or the risk of getting caught up on that. It's easy to remove and easy to put back on when you want it back on the bike. The mirrors work really well. They're clear even at speed on freeway speeds. They're not very pretty, but they are very, very functional. They sit outside wide enough. They're behind my shoulder, but not so wide they're sticking outside the bike. And the motor is very smooth, and that helps these mirrors work well. Even on the freeway, I have very little vibration, and when the cruise control is working, I can relax, take my hand off it. I can put my hands on the tank if I want to, and just cruise down the freeway and be very, very happy with it. Certainly there are other motorcycles that are better for long distance touring, but when I took this on a 3,500 mile road trip, I didn't have any real complaints about the bike at all. It performed wonderfully and was very comfortable. And as long as the cruise control is working, I could just relax my hands, just enjoy the scenery. Protection is also a big concern on these bikes. We spend a lot of money and a lot of attention on how much a motorcycle weighs when we're purchasing it. But often the first thing you do is you buy a bunch of protection and guards and you just weigh it down. This bike didn't require that, and it means that not only is it one of the lightest bikes in class, or the lightest bike currently in class, it's just slightly heavier than my old F800 GS and just a little under its competition. I don't have to add a bunch of guards. This fuel tank down at the bottom is very durable, and it has a plastic skid plate on the outside, which allows me to deflect off of mud, rocks, embankments, and it works very well. A lot of riders are putting big metal guards out here, but this bike's pretty wide at the base. Not quite 1200 GS wide, but definitely it's a wide motorcycle. Adding those guards on the outside means you have a solid object now. When you ride into something, instead of it flexing and moving, it's going to wedge in. Also, this is angled just slightly. It allows me to deflect out of things. The hand guards on this are from the factory, are plastic hand guard, and they worked really well. They lasted all summer long through the BDRs, through all the training, all the small tip overs, the deliberate set downs. As long as it landed on a solid surface and could flex just a little bit, it protected everything it was supposed to protect. On my very last ride, it didn't make it. I dropped it in some deep mud and it allowed too much flex and they snapped off. So I have switched out to the aluminum bark busters on this motorcycle. I wouldn't tell riders to swap out the factory guards until they break or until they need them. They do a pretty darn good job. That's a big sell. If you're buying this motorcycle, consider that a massive weight savings. If you're looking at another motorcycle and you're comparing weight, how much weight are you going to add to protect it? You're looking for the things that really matter. I'm not worried about the plastic here. I'm worried about the radiator. This one's well inside the hand guards and the tank, so my radiator is as protected as I could expect it to be. For touring, I switched over to the 790S seat, which is a 2-step seat. It's flatter, it's wider, and it's a little firmer. And on long road trips, it's definitely more comfortable. I've kept my R seat for going off-road. That way I don't trash my touring seat. The R seat is not uncomfortable, it's just the S seat is more comfortable. I do not like the S shield. The windshield on the S model creates a lot more wind turbulence. The R model sits low enough that I end up with a lot of clean airflow, not a lot of wind turbulence. For me, I'd prefer the clean airflow. I've owned this bike now for 9 months, but I've only had maybe 4 months of actual riding. I had 2 months when I was out traveling, out of country. I had 2 months when I was traveling and teaching in the United States, and I've lost about a month of riding with the bike just being out of service or sitting at the dealership for warranty. For a 2020 that's only 9 months old with 4 months of riding time, that's a lot of time sitting in the dealership. So I'm hoping to get all that warranty stuff sorted out, including the current issues, the blacked out screen, which is pending, the clutch switch, which is on order, the cruise control, which nobody seems to know what the issue is, possible neutral switch for the side stand, but hopefully all of that's going to be remedied and the bike's going to be 100% and go from there. A lot of issues for a 2020. I nicknamed the bike Friday. I assume maybe it was assembled, started halfway around lunchtime on Friday and finished before lunch on Monday. But if not, there we go. That's all right. So just to make sure you understand, I'm not doing a bitch fest on the KTM. My Tiger had a transmission failure with less than 2,000 miles on it. The dealers didn't make it right. BMW's had their issues. Honda has their issues. This one certainly has a long laundry list. And like most manufacturers, they really aren't excited about paying out for warranty repair. The way I think one of the things that I think has helped make the dealership support me or to get KTM to do the repairs is I have been documenting everything along the way, not just on paper, but with video. When the rotors became loose, I videoed and showed how loose they were. When the cruise control stopped working, I videoed that it wouldn't activate. When the bike wouldn't start, I had my wife hold the camera and I showed them every component so that the bike was in proper position to start and would not start. Everything I can, I record. The bike likes to take 3 to 4 starts in the morning. Quite often, it's fairly normal. You have to hit the button before it will hold in idle. I recorded that. And when they asked for proof, I produced a video of all of those things in row. I posted them as an unlisted video and I sent the link to the dealership and to KTM. I think that made a big difference in helping with those warranty claims. They could see it. It's undeniable. If you have issues, any manufacturer, if you can document what's going on, and you can get video of it, even better, even phone video, most of it's just phone video, that's going to make a big difference. Still love the bike when it's running well. Love it on the road, love it on the trails. Fantastic. If you're thinking about 790 or 890, good for you. Great motorcycles. Just know there are some intricacies that are issues that you may, hopefully they'll fix on the 890, and there's certainly a propensity for this particular model to have a list of items. Some people are, of course, completely free of any issues, and others, they have a laundry list.